Well, this afternoon, Senate Democrats launched another effort to shield the Biden administration from blame for its disastrous border policies, bringing back to the floor of the Senate similar border legislation to a bill that failed in February, once again lacking the votes to advance it. Now, that was the same thing that occurred last time. They were unable to advance this bill. Chuck Schumer failed once again to provide the cover the Biden administration is looking for on this issue that is increasingly becoming a top issue for voters. Joining me now to discuss this is U.S. Senator John Cornyn from the state of Texas. He serves on the Senate Judiciary Committee, the Senate Finance Committee, and the Select Committee on Intelligence. Senator Cornyn, welcome back to Washington Watch. Always good to see you. Great to be with you, Tony. So this afternoon, was this a show vote by the Democrats?
Absolutely. It was a non-serious effort to try to get some political cover for all the reasons you mentioned. The Biden administration and Democrats have done nothing while millions of migrants have made their way across the border and moved across the country. And the drugs that killed 108,000 Americans came across right after that, making these criminal cartels wealthier by the day. And then there's the 400,000 children, the unaccompanied minors that were placed with sponsors that the administration simply lost track of. So this is a huge political liability, in addition to being a humanitarian and public safety crisis. And they were looking for some kind of political cover. But the American people are smart, and they're not going to be fooled by this sort of show vote today.
Senator Cornyn, I want to play a clip of the Senate scare leader Chuck Schumer and what he had to say earlier today about this bill. Clip number 1, please.
3 months ago, something truly stunning happened here on the Senate floor. Senate Republicans filibustered the strongest, most comprehensive border security bill Congress has seen in a generation. And they did it because Donald Trump wanted to exploit the border for political gain on the campaign trail. Well, today we're going to try again.
Your response, Senator?
Well, that's not true. That's my first response. But Tony, what kind of confidence can we have that President Biden would actually enforce any law we might pass? He hasn't enforced existing laws, which are basically the same as were in effect when President Trump was in office, with much different results. We had much better control of the border back when President Trump was president of the United States, because that's the job of the executive, which is to enforce the laws. Congress can pass laws, yes, but if the administration is unwilling to enforce them, that's, I think, the reason why there wasn't a lot of enthusiasm for this particular piece of legislation.
Yeah, as I understand the bill, and I've looked at it, and I think this is identical to the previous bill that was advanced. This really isn't a border security bill. It's an immigration enhancement bill, is it not?
Yeah, the part of the problem is it basically would make it possible for as many as 5,000 migrants a day to make it across the border before there would be a surge of resources to deal with the overage or the higher numbers that we've seen as high as 13,000 a day at one point. But the concern was that this is not so much a desire to secure the border now as to tie the hands of the next president. I think our Democratic colleagues realize increasingly it looks like President Trump will be president, and they'd like to try to find some way to handcuff him with the current policies that would be part of this bill.
Right. So
that was another problem with this particular legislation. It really would make it harder for President Trump to clean up the mess next year.
So, Senator Cornyn, I mean, the narrative of the Democrats is that the Republicans rejected this legislation at the behest of former President Trump in order to campaign on the Biden administration's disastrous border policies. But, I mean, as you just pointed out, the president has the authority, just as President Trump had the authority, to address the border situation. I was there on the border a few times during the Trump administration, the last time being after he put in place the Remain in Mexico policy, and it was like a ghost town. There was nobody at the border.
It's much different today. Well, basically, the Biden administration has done nothing but welcome migrants and then releasing them into the interior of the United States, some claiming asylum and waiting perhaps as many as 10 years before they would ultimately go before an immigration judge. But many of them were paroled, which is a unique meaning here. But basically what that means is that they're released, even when they are not claiming asylum, as a way to manage the bottlenecks at the border. So this bill was more of a management of this humanitarian and public safety crisis to try to move people into the interior of the country. But as we've seen with Governor Abbott, among others, transporting some of these migrants to the sanctuary cities of Washington, D.C. and New York and Chicago, other places are starting to feel the consequences of this problem, as well as the drugs that are taking the lives of young people all across the country, with fentanyl poisoning alone being the leading cause of death of young people between the age of 18 and 45.
Would it be accurate to say, Senator Cornyn, that if the Senate, under the leadership of Chuck Schumer, were serious about addressing the border, that they would simply have a vote on H.R. 2, which passed the House last year?
Absolutely. That would be the first step. And because, as you might imagine, the House wants the Senate to vote on the bill that they passed last year. And you can imagine, even if there were the votes in the Senate to pass the legislation we voted on today, the House would be unlikely to take that up. So again, this is more of theater and more of a show vote than it is actually trying to solve a real problem.
Over on the other side of the Capitol this afternoon, the House moved a vote to repeal a Washington, D.C. law, because Congress has oversight of Washington, the federal city, that allows non-citizens to vote in local elections. Now, Washington, D.C., this isn't the only city that allows that. But what we had was 52 Democrats joined with all Republicans in the House to pass this bill. How concerned are you about election integrity with the November election approaching?
Well, I'm very concerned. We saw after 2020 that there were efforts across the country in the individual states to make sure that the integrity of the vote was protected. We want to make it easy for every legitimate voter to cast their ballot, but conversely, we want to make sure that people who are not authorized to vote can't, because it dilutes the vote of legal voters. But as you point out, we have special jurisdiction over the District of Columbia, Washington, D.C., and I think it's the right message, it's the right vote, and hopefully sends a message across the rest of the country that this is about American citizens being able to vote, not just casting the most votes from whatever source, including people who are not legally present in the country.
Now, you're part of the Republican leadership in the Senate. Any chance that the Republicans will be able to force a vote on this in the Senate?
We certainly will try. Senator Schumer, as you know, controls the agenda as the leader, the majority leader, but there are various mechanisms that we can use, including calling up the bill under a unanimous consent. I think it's pretty sure that Senator Schumer and others will object, but I think it also raises the visibility of the issue, but it also puts the responsibility squarely where it belongs with Democrats to block this common sense piece of legislation.
You know, I don't know if you agree with me or not, but I think allowing non-citizens to vote is un-American. I mean,
absolutely.
What we're doing is we are undermining what this country stands for. Now, if they want to become citizens and they go through the process, I welcome. That's great. But this is undermining our republic, our institutions in which we have confidence and trust by allowing non-citizens to vote. I can't imagine any other country allowing people to come in and manipulate the system as we're allowing to occur.
Well, Tony, let me give you one additional reason to be concerned. Senator Hawley Senator, our colleague from Hagerty from Tennessee, introduced an amendment which said that you could not count non-citizens for purpose of the Electoral College or for purposes of drawing congressional districts. Right now, that's not the case. And every single Democrat in the Senate voted against that. So I think there's a very clear trend here, letting people in without any restrictions across the border, letting non-citizens vote, and then letting those non-citizens form the basis of drawing congressional districts and the Electoral College. It's a pretty consistent trend, and it's not a good one.
So what do you think is the primary motivating factor for the Democrats just to basically ignore the rule of law and allow people to flood this country and then vote? Is this their blitz to try to take over the country with illegal votes?
I don't know if there's any other conclusion to be drawn. I've been reluctant to sort of say, well, that's what they're doing, but I don't know of any other explanation for what they're doing. Flooding illegal immigrants into the country, allowing them to vote, and then using those non-citizens for purposes of drawing congressional lines in the Electoral College. I don't know any other explanation other than it's a quest for power, political power. What they're finding, though, is even among Hispanics, for example, in Texas and elsewhere, as many of them are as chagrined and concerned about the massive illegal immigration across the borders, that they are now tending to vote more Republican because of the consequences. So I don't think it's working, but that doesn't mean that it's not dangerous.
Yeah, I agree. I do think it potentially could backfire because we're looking at not only are they more conservative voters, they're also more faith-driven voters, is what we have found, which leads to them voting conservative. Senator John Cornyn, we just got a couple minutes left. I want to switch gears, if I can, in the last couple of minutes we have together, because you're a former judge, maybe I could say a recovering judge. And exactly. I want to get your thoughts on what's been unfolding in New York City with former President Donald Trump.
Well, I'm deeply troubled, Tony. You know, there's certain basic institutions in our country that should be beyond politics. And I think the judiciary and our justice system are those institutions. We've seen the erosion of public confidence in the FBI and the Department of Justice at the federal level, but to have what is blatantly a political prosecution of the Republican nominee for president of the United States during the campaign for presidency is, I think, outrageous, and also further undermines people's confidence in that what's supposed to be a non-political, non-partisan institution. But then when you dig down and you look at the very allegations here, none of this should have gone to trial because all of this would either be barred by the statute of limitations, and the prosecutor can't tie this to any sort of federal criminal offense. So I hope the judge does the right thing and dismisses this case ultimately. If not, I hope the jury will acquit the president. But this is very deeply damaging and corrosive to public confidence in what should be one of the basic institutions in our society.
Yeah, I agree. It's very, very, very disturbing when we lose that confidence. Our system only works in that way. But it just seems like there's this cascading of events like this. In fact, it's unprecedented how many times we're using unprecedented because it seems like every day there's something new, a new attack on our republic and the underlying foundation, which makes it work. Senator John Cornyn, always great to see you. Thanks so much for taking time to join us today.
Thanks, Tony. Great to be with you. Appreciate it.